guys, I'm Megan, and I am really excited to be able to study God's Word with you guys and get to know God better through the process. So today we're going to be looking at the first part of Elijah the prophet's story. So we're going to be looking in 1 Kings 16, 29 through 34, and chapter 17, verse 1. In the 38th year of Asa, king of Judah, Ahab son of Omri became king of Israel, and he reigned in Samaria over Israel 22 years. Ahab son of Omri did more evil in the eyes of the Lord than did any of those before him. He not only considered it trivial to commit the sins of Jeroboam son of Nebat, but he also married Jezebel, daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians, and began to serve Baal and worship him. He set up an altar for Baal in the temple of Baal that he built in Samaria. Ahab also made an Asherah pole, and did more to arouse the anger of the Lord, the God of Israel, than did all the kings of Israel before him. In Ahab's time, Eljh of Bethel rebuilt Jericho. He laid its foundations at the cost of his firstborn son, Abram, and he set up its gates at the cost of his youngest son, Segum, in accordance with the word of the Lord spoken by Joshua son of Nun. Now Elijah, the Tishbite from Tishbe in Gilead, said to Ahab, "As the Lord, the God of Israel lives, whom I serve, there will be neither dew nor rain in the next few years, except at my word." So, right at the beginning, we see our context for Elijah's coming and the reason why God has sent his special messenger, the prophet, to Israel. So, verse 29 says, by the time of Ahab, and this is Ahab, king of Israel, and the split, the kingdom's division after Solomon it's already been 58 years at this point. And so the northern kingdom has had 7 kings, and they have all been evil kings. And now Ahab is the 8th king, and it says about Ahab, son of Omri, in verse 30, that he is more evil than any of the kings that came before him, and God is very displeased at him. This whole context is kind of the extent to Ahab's mockery of God. He goes very far to do it, and first of all, he commits the sins of his forefathers. So it talks about this one man, or king, Jeroboam son of Nebat, which Ahab commits all the sins that he has as well, so he angers God. Ahab also marries Jezebel, and this is bad for 2 reasons. Because number one, Jezebel is a foreign princess, basically. She's the daughter of this Ethbaal, king of Sidonians, which is not part of the Israelites, obviously, by the name. And so, because of this, Jezebel brings in her god, and her god is Baal-Makart, and so the worship of Baal becomes prominent in Israel. Obviously, Ahab is not following after God, he's following after other gods of other places because of this wife he married. So, Baal-Makart, one interesting thing about this god is that he's basically the all-powerful god of the Sidonians. He is the god of weather, god of storm, rain, good crops, fertility, and all aspects of life. So we'll get into the significance of that later on in 1 Kings, in Elijah's story. But also, Jezebel is a very persistent and demanding woman. So she does not want coexistence between Yahweh and between Baal, her god. So what she does, as said in 1 Kings 18, verse 4, she she tries to wipe out all of Yahweh's prophets, which she thinks by doing this, killing off all the prophets, obviously the worship of Yahweh and even the God will be dead. But we know that's not true, but that's what she thinks. And so that's where we are in 1 Kings 16. But one more thing that happens right before Elijah enters the scene is verse 34. It says, in Ahab's time, Eljh of Bethel rebuilt Jericho. So this guy named Eljh of Bethel, he's rebuilding Jericho, and at first when I read this, I didn't really know the significance, why is this happening, but if we look back where it says something, in accordance with the word of the Lord spoken by Joshua son of Nun. So if we look back in Joshua, right after Jericho was demolished, right after the Israelites walked 7 times around the walls and Jericho fell, Joshua pronounces something told him by God. And so he says, quote, "Cursed before the Lord is the one who undertakes to rebuild the city, Jericho. At the cost of his firstborn son, he will lay its foundations. At the cost of his youngest, he will set up its gates." And we see this happen right here when this man named Eljh of Bethel, in Ahab's time, tries to rebuild Jericho. He loses his firstborn son, and he loses his youngest son because he's doing this. And so the significance of that is not just that this man went against God and obviously his sons died, but it's also that through this it's shown that God punishes. He comes through. He's just, and he punishes the wicked, just like he says he would. So this is kind of like a foreshadowing that we can use. It's the bigger picture here is just that God is just, and he will come through. He will punish the wicked. So we know that Ahab's sins are very many and that he has done a lot of evil in the sight of God, but we have that knowledge that one day he'll be punished. But then we come to chapter 17, verse 1, and we're introduced to Elijah the Tishbite from Tishbe. So it doesn't say much else about Elijah except for that one piece of information. And Tishbe is actually, in the subscript of some Bibles, it says of the settlers, or of sojourners, or just people on the move. So Elijah was from like a clan, probably, of people who sojourned around, and they were on the move, constantly going from one place to another. So he was obviously a great guy for God to call, and he answered God's call, and he became God's prophet. So we don't know like a lot about Elijah, but it doesn't really matter because that's not really what God looks for. When he looks for a person, he doesn't look at like how much they've done, their achievements, accomplishments, and even their failures or what they haven't done, but he just looks to see if they're willing to be used by God, and Elijah was definitely ready to be used by God. But one interesting thing about Elijah is his name actually means "my God is Yahweh," so that's really cool. And not only does his name signify who his God is, the first few words out of his mouth are, "As the Lord, the God of Israel lives, whom I serve." So obviously he first clearly establishes who he's working for and who his God is in front of Ahab. I think that's very applicable to our lives. We should be asking ourselves, who are our gods? Or what are the gods in our life? And what gods can we get rid of in our life? Because we should only have one God in our life. And then also, like, whose are we? When we say, "This is the God I serve," who is that? Also, I think it's significant that when Elijah comes in to Ahab, it doesn't say anything about, like, if he bowed down or do anything that would just kind of signify, like, respect. But I think that from this we can see that Elijah, he didn't come with, like, the correct kingly protocol because he knew that his king wasn't in the room. Well, his king was God, and so he wouldn't need to bow down. He wouldn't need to, like, worship Ahab because Ahab's not his king. And then one super cool thing about this verse 1 is that when Elijah comes in, he talks about God and he says that this is who I serve. And then he says, "As the Lord, the God of Israel lives, there will be neither dew nor rain in the next few years except at my word." And so his words right there and his statement, it comes with power because he's questioning the authenticity and the power of Ahab's God or Jezebel's God, so the power of Baal-Machort. Because, as you remember, Baal-Machort is the god of weather, storm, rain, all those things, good crops, fertility, and basically all aspects of life. And when Elijah says that there's going to be no rain, there's going to be no dew until I say so, because God is in control, my God is in control. He's really questioning Ahab's God and saying, your God is powerless, my God is the one who controls all these things. So it's kind of ridiculous because we see on one hand there's Ahab and there's Jezebel, and there's his false god Baal, and the priests and priestesses. So it looks like there's way more power on one side than just Yahweh and Elijah, who's his only prophet at this point. But Elijah's really reminding us that God is powerful, and he's more powerful than the false god Baal and the power of just like an earthly king, Ahab. So from these verses, the exposition to the story and the stories to come is set, and so our hearts are like fearing for Elijah and for what's going to come, but we're also like super in awe of his courage. And so I think one thing that we can take away from the man of God, who is Elijah, is that he was a man with a nature like ours. That's what James says in the Bible. And so Elijah was just like us in the fact that he is human. And so he's not like some crazy man with superpowers that he somehow had or created for himself. He was human, but he believed in the power of God, and we can do the same thing. Elijah was a common man with an uncommon courage. So he stood out, and he knew God, and he sought after God, and he was willing to be used by God, which is really important. So we can have, obviously, the same sort of faith as Elijah, but it's important that we're willing to be used by God at all costs. Well, friends, that's all for today. I hope to be able to see you guys in the next videos, continuing to study about Elijah's life and what he did and how we can apply that to our own lives. Bye!